The first 911 call that we received occurred at 7:49 and 11 seconds. That call lasted 1 minute and 59 seconds. The first entry was that there was a male with a huge rock standing in front of the business. The caller went on to report that a clothing description and that the suspect was standing outside and had been verbally threatening. The call stated that it was unknown at that time whether the suspect was intoxicated or emotionally disturbed. At 7:58 and 26 seconds, the supervisor acknowledged that he was aware of the call and that it was in a holding status at that time. At 8:02 and 15 seconds, an officer was assigned to respond to this call, and the officer stated that he would advise, meaning that he would let other officers know whether or not they were needed once he arrived on scene. The officer arrived on scene at 8:09 and 51 seconds, and it appears from looking at the video that we have at that point that he's looking at the computer screen in his car, reading through the call. We see a person exit the business and yell at the officer, directing him to come inside. This occurs at approximately 8:10 and 36 seconds. 4 seconds later, our officer enters the Banu coffee shop and is directed by a woman in the doorway pointing towards the disturbance. The officer yells 3 seconds later, "Stop." And what's happening at this point that you can see on the video is there is a disturbance taking place. There are several subjects that are on the floor, and the officer is giving direction to stop, and he actually has his taser out at this point. One of the individuals on the floor is telling him that it's not him, but they're holding the suspect down on the ground. At 8:10 and 57 seconds, the officer approaches the suspect, and the bystanders, he walks over towards where the disturbance is occurring, and he can be seen pulling out his handcuffs. At this point, as he's approaching the suspect on the ground, the two civilians that had come to assist the initial person who had been assaulted inside the coffee shop began to back away as the officer was moving in to apply the handcuffs. What we know from looking at the video at this point is that the officer's duty belt comes loose at this point, and the officer can be seen having to place his handcuffs down and with both hands regain control of his duty belt and put that back on. It's at this time that the suspect gets up and flees from the coffee shop. The officer, approximately 12 seconds later from the timestamps on the video, goes out the same door that the suspect went out, and it can then be heard over the radio, another officer asking him if the suspect, basically the description, because he saw someone running on Congress Avenue, which is directly next door to where this incident took place. The initial officer confirmed that that in fact was the suspect, and at this point, multiple officers were in the area and began a foot pursuit of this suspect. During this pursuit, we lost sight of the suspect, and the officers were attempting to locate where he may have gone to. At 8:11:49 is when it was advised that the subject had run behind the Freebirds restaurant. The officer exited his vehicle and ran in that direction, but had lost sight of the suspect at that point. For several minutes, officers are trying to locate the suspect. There's a belief that he has gone down in the creek, that he might be under the bridge, or that he might be at the apartment complex next door. While all of this is taking place, the initial officer went back to the coffee shop and sought medical aid for the victim that was assaulted inside the coffee shop, and then ultimately went back outside again where the foot pursuit was taking place. What we know during this time when we had lost sight of the suspect was he entered the Freebirds establishment and violently assaulted 2 people, resulting in the death of 1. And as also has been reported, we ultimately located that suspect on top of the establishment, and at a short time later, he jumped and, as was reported earlier, has succumbed to his injuries as a result of him jumping off of that roof. There's a lot of information that we're still culling through, a lot of people that we're still talking with, And again, this is an ongoing investigation. The investigation will take some time. We are also conducting an internal investigation into our response to this incident to ensure that it was compliant with our policies and practices as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Detective Greenwald for an update on the homicide investigation to the extent that we can give you more information at this time.
Thank you, Chief, for that information. We do have a couple of updates, and we also have a request from the public to contact us if they know anything about this case. I'm going to give you some specific details on that as well. This is the first murder of the year, January 3rd. It occurred at 515 South Congress Avenue. Our victim is positively identified now as Jonathan Aguilar, 34-year-old Hispanic male born April 11th, 1985. He's a longstanding citizen of Austin, Texas, and a manager at the Freebirds Burrito restaurant located at that address. Our suspect is positively identified as Dylan Woodburn. He is a 27-year-old white male born October 4th, 1992. Our understanding, based on the investigation at this time, is after the assault and foot chase that occurred at the Banu Coffee Shop, when the suspect entered into the Freebirds establishment, the restaurant was closed at the time that this happened, and he entered through a side door that was open. We believe that the attack that occurred inside the Freebirds was just as random as what happened in Banu. We don't know that there's any association or formal relationship between the suspect or the victims. There was no words that were spoken before the attack took place. It was just a violent, unprovoked attack by the suspect. We don't know what his motive is at this time. We are seeking information from any family or friends or associates of Mr. Woodburn that might have known him during his time here in Austin. We know that he's not originally from the Austin area. We don't know exactly when he arrived here in Austin, so we're asking for anybody who might have known Mr. Woodburn or was associated with him, especially in the 24 hours leading up to this incident, to please contact the Austin Police Department homicide tip line at area code 512-477-3588. Are there any questions that you guys might have at this time?
Real quick, I just want to, if I may, real quick, extend condolences from the Austin Police Department to Mr. Aguilar's family, to the two other victims who were also assaulted during this incident, and to all of those that were a party to what happened that day, either witnesses or business owners. Our hearts are with you and with our community as we go through this tragic event. And before we open it up for questions, I know there's a lot being discussed out there about homelessness, and that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about a horrific incident that occurred in our community and to provide as much information to our community as we can at this time. So with that, we'll open it up for questions.
So witnesses had detained the suspect at Banu. When the officer was approaching them, did he tell the witnesses to back up, back off while he handcuffed him?
I've heard that being widely reported. I've watched the videos that I have a few times, and it's very hard to discern at this point exactly who is saying what, and that's part of the ongoing review. What is clear from the video is it is a very tight and confined space, and the two bystanders that came to the victim's aid in that restaurant and took the suspect to the ground were on top of the suspect, holding him down when the officer arrived. The officer appears to step over them and is in arm's length of them when they appeared to be backing away, and he appears to be moving forward as his gun belt breaks loose.
Chief, you said the first call came in at 7:49 a.m. We were told that reports that there may have been a similar man with a similar description that police made contact with maybe at the Hyatt hours before this. Are you able to confirm any of that there was any prior kind of engagement with police and this individual before this kind of incident unfolded at 7 or the first 911 call came in?
I don't have any information on any prior dealings with him that day. I do not.
This suspect had a criminal history, and do you know what the terms of the plea deal was to get him back out into the public?
No, I would refer any questions specific to him being released or any pending charges over to either the county or district attorney's office.
Did he die on Saturday, or when was the official?
It was late Friday night.
Late Friday night.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you said that you don't want to talk about the homelessness issue, but obviously this crime has been politicized all over Twitter by now. There's been a lot of people who are, worried about whether random attacks like this could happen because of that. Anything you can say on that regard?
You know, we would just encourage everyone, as always, to pay attention to your own safety and the safety of those around you, to always maintain yourself in a condition where you can take care of yourself, where you can get out of an area if you need to get out of an area. If we just look beyond what happened here last week, but look at what's going on a national and international level right now, we all need to be hypervigilant these days about safety and security, especially in public spaces.
This is a basic question, but how often do duty belts come off?
Well, that is not obviously what is expected to happen. These are meant to be secured, and that's why we're doing a review of how that occurred.
The knife that was used, did the suspect bring that into Freebirds, or did you take that from Freebirds?
I don't think we're gonna-
Well, it's still an open investigation, but everything we're seeing right now indicates that he definitely got that knife from inside the Freebirds. We don't believe that he brought it with him.
Looks like Woodburn was charged with burglary of a non-residence in September of last year when he came into like an AFD of Austin Fire Station off 183 near Burnett. He was charged for that. Is this person, Woodburn, is he known by police for having a criminal history?
Again, we can provide information on his criminal history. If you have specific questions about that charge or release from that charge, we refer you back over to the district attorney's office.
I mean, just out of curiosity, is this considered on your terms an accident? I mean, it sounds like a life almost could have been saved from an unfortunate accident. I know it was the belt you said, but maybe from your standpoint in the department, would it maybe just response to, would it be an accident or?
Well, that's the purpose of conducting the review that we're going to conduct. We want to know the circumstances under which the officer's duty belt came free, because obviously that is something that we do not expect to have happen. We expect to provide our officers with the best equipment, and we expect our equipment to perform appropriately, and that's why we're conducting this review, is to understand exactly how that happened.
Chief, it seems almost a little out of the ordinary to have two civilians pin down a suspect like this. What do you want people to do if somebody is being aggressive to the point where they think that they're a harm to the safety of others in a public space, like what happened?
You know, that's a personal decision that each person needs to make. I can only imagine how hard it would be to sit there and to not help that gentleman that was being violently assaulted. And so I think that that shows the humanity and the courage of these bystanders that jumped in to help in what were dangerous circumstances. And I think that says a lot about them. And we live in a day and age where unfortunately that becomes more and more necessary. So I think it is a personal decision that each individual has to make if they find themselves in those circumstances, but just be fully aware that you don't know that person's mental state, you don't know whether they are armed, and so those are all things that you have to take into consideration.
Were there signs that the suspect was high or going through a mental health crisis at the time, and can you really give us any info on that?
That's all part of the ongoing investigation. At this point, we've been obviously able to watch some videos, and we understand what his conduct was alleged to have been, both inside and outside the restaurant, but that'll all be part of the ongoing review.
Last question.
The first call was at 7:47 and the officer arrived at 8:09.
I can go back through my time points here and get that exactly for you here. The first call came in at dispatch at 7:49:11, and it looks like it entered the dispatch queue at 7:50:07, and then I gave the initial arrival time. Let me find that in here. The initial arrival time was 8:09 and 51 seconds. Thank you.
Do you guys prefer to speak quicker than that?